81. Still here.
Still here. We're still here and still saying it.
Yeah.
Annabelle did say, she's like, "Hey, Mommy, you should wear your own merch." I'm like, maybe we will wear our merch.
Maybe we will.
I'm like, would you wear our merch? She's like, no. I'm like, what if it's something awesome? She's like, no.
Like, no, if it's something awesome, or no, it won't possibly be something awesome.
She will never wear our merch. But what if it's the only clothes she has?
That's right.
What if the only clothes she has in her closet
you want to wear something that's not
merch?
our merch? Go get a job. That'll show them. She's got opinions.
I didn't know where that came from. What? Where did you pull that out of?
We're not gonna buy your clothes. 18. There's a door. Good luck.
Which, there's some kids who experience that is the truth.
Ooh,
I just never.
I was not ready at 18.
Like, I don't think we taught her that. I don't think there was this rhetoric of like, oh, you're 18. Guess what? When you go to college, you're cut off from us.
Because obviously she doesn't think that would apply to her.
Well, maybe.
I don't think she would think that applies to her.
She's on some sort of kick of being grown up. And so because she thinks she needs to grow up really, really fast, she's pushing him to grow up. And he's clueless about the whole thing.
Yeah. He doesn't. I'm not sure he wants to grow up that fast.
I don't think anybody should grow up that fast.
No, I wish I could grow down instead of grow up. Maybe not with wisdom, but with, I don't know, maybe not. I say that and I think I take it back.
Yeah, no, I am fine with the way I am.
There's this weird, like, things were certainly easier back in the day, but that doesn't mean it was better.
Yeah, there's this, with me, it was this rush to control my own destiny, but that's obviously out of the pain body because I felt like the circumstances that I was living under were out of control.
Yeah,
right?
No, I mean, I felt exactly the same way.
So, partially because it's like, okay, because of all the mistrust that I have towards, I don't know, generalized humanity, obviously out of a pain body of unsafety, that growing up, the quicker I can grow up, the more safe I would be.
Yeah, I remember I was young. I was probably 10-ish, sitting on my front porch, cutting wood, and I'm like, oh, I could make toothpicks, and I could sell toothpicks. And I didn't actually consider the fact that, a factory can make 10 million toothpicks for 8 pennies. And so
How old were you?
10. I was really young. I was just out there with like a piece of wood, and I'm like, oh, I can make toothpicks and sell them. Never went down that business model. But
I mean, there's something to be said about like a fancy toothpick but you have to wash it. Do you know what I mean? Like in the sense of American.
Yeah.
But floss is actually better than toothpick.
Yeah. Well,
we use toothpicks.
We are in Kentucky.
We use toothpicks for like
projects and stuff.
Yeah, well, and I check the baking with toothpicks.
Yeah.
And then we hold the sandwiches with toothpicks.
Yeah.
I don't know if actually toothpicks are used for teeth picking in our house.
Not too much, no.
But were toothpicks invented before floss? Probably.
Yeah, surely, right? It comes just a sharp piece of wood. You're digging out stuff you have in your teeth. That's instead of some sort of fiber. It has to be a pretty thin fiber. Like if you use some sort of plant thing, it's gonna make it worse.
Yeah. But yet we still sell toothpicks, right? Like
I don't know if they're, used for toothpicking.
Yeah, probably not. It's it's funny because for the things that you use toothpick for is to hold your food, or even if you use toothpicks for toothing, some of them are like color dyed, and there's no way that there are natural colors, which is basically food coloring. I mean,
right.
So
yeah, we have some. I bought those a while ago, and then after I bought them, I'm like, well, that was dumb, because it's like I don't want to put them in food. And I didn't want to put them in my mouth.
Yeah, but that was probably before we were big on not using food coloring.
Yeah. And so maybe for projects, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. This transitions us into our topic. Speaking of being dumb.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to transition. And so I think it segues well, hopefully segues well from our previous conversations, but maybe like just a different take on the nature of our reality,
Yeah.
and then what it means to change our reality and where the reality is going. But ideally not from like a doomsday standpoint. Like the goal of the podcast is to actually to show a path forward
Yeah.
without doomsdaying and leaving it there.
And a little bit of context around that. We watched a show called The Portal on Gaia. And on it there was this there's several people like being interviewed, and one of them is Daniel Schmachtenberger. And both of us independently were like, this guy seems very interesting. And so we went on a rabbit hole of watching several podcasts that he is on, all of which are 3-4 hours long. And he is a fascinating guy.
Yeah. You should link some of his podcasts.
I will. Yeah, all of these will be linked. And he does research into like, what do I say, the existential threats facing humanity, I guess. And how things could go wrong, but then what we could do to help them not go wrong. Things could go wrong, like with drone warfare or nuclear weapons or AI. AI is a big one. Or things could go wrong with, well, we're going to suppress and control everything with the authoritarian government. Those are two ways things could go wrong. But there's some very narrow path down the middle of those where we don't lose all of our rights and we don't blow ourselves up. What does that look like? And it's really interesting, and it's really subtle, and it goes against what I don't want to say it goes against our nature, but it goes against the nature that has been ingrained in especially Western and modern society to achieve at all costs, to win, to make the most money, and focusing on these narrow goals.
That's kind of his thesis.
Yeah.
His thesis is the reason why we are in the position we are right now. And in his eyes, like something drastically needs to change in order for us to continue to
not kill ourselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. And so, to some extent, yeah, this is what's interesting. When we saw him on the portal, the first thing that he said is, I spend a lot of time being in the world, and I don't remember the exact words, but where we lived in like utopian, higher enlightened state of existence, like where we lived in the perfect existence, right?
Oh, I don't remember.
That's the thing that actually caught me. I was like, wait, when you say that, I need more about that.
Yeah. Did he say that he spent a lot of time thinking about it, or a lot of time being in it?
You can understand why it would catch my attention.
Yeah,
right. Because, I spend a lot of time in places that are not necessarily part of this reality. And so when somebody else says something that could be interpreted, other people have said things like this before, people who are in positions. And, like it, rings that bell in my head. I'm like, wait, that could mean a lot of things. When you say that could mean a lot of things. And so, so it hit, right. To say that in the show, like, right, I'm pretty sure he said that. If nothing else, that is what my brain heard in order to lock in on whatever he has to say forward after that, right? And so if you spend a lot of time getting familiarized, and I've said this, with a place that is different than the current circumstances, right? Or I think I said this on the last podcast, or becoming familiar with it, carrying the frequency of it, you become ingrained in the nuance, right? Because there's this energetic nuance that just as a set represents that reality. Just like there's an energetic nuance that quite literally represents our reality. But the reason why we do not feel this nuance is because it is just the nature of our status quo. Like it's quite literally us, like everything we know and everything that is our existence. And so from that, we don't even think that there's this nuance that is the representation of us, right? And the only way you will be able to feel the nuance is if you go somewhere else, experience something vastly different, and then go, wait, the nuance here is different. And, if you and I talk about how, like, when we travel around the world, when we went to Japan, like, there was a very obvious nuance that was different.
I mean, yes, culturally.
But just in general, just baseline of vibratory nature of the collective. The collective is vibrating at a different reality than we are in the United States of America.
Right. And it's what I meant was, like, I think people would naively ascribe that to just being a cultural difference. And yes, obviously there are many cultural differences between the United States and Japan, but it seems deeper than that. It seems like, I don't know how to word it in a way that doesn't end up sounding like it's a cultural thing. It's just
to Daniel's point, right? What the point that he tries to make is that our innate set of beliefs, social norms, propagation of like normal ways of being, right? What the nuance that I'm describing is a one blanket statement. Quite literally is the circumstances of our reality.
Yeah.
But that is a physical spill out of the internal vibratory field, right?
Yeah.
So how we vibrate, this podcast is not about physical. It's a kind of I'm hoping this episode will kind of blend the two, right? It is not about the physicality. It's this innate expression of our inner self, right? And it is also innate expression of our consciousness, the level of consciousness. Like in the last podcast, we talked about what is consciousness, right? Is it the last podcast? And like basically our reality is representation of how conscious we are, right? So if we're not conscious about the interconnectedness between us all, and we think that we are this closed off circuit system that only operates internally, right?
Yeah.
Within ourselves or within our neighborhood or within our county or city or whatever, right? Then by default, we are, to his point, only making decisions based on that conscious interpretation of reality.
Right. And yeah, okay, well, there you go. There's a big difference between the Japanese culture and our culture. The Japanese culture, in Japan, they seem to be very aware of the connectedness of everyone and everything.
Yeah.
Every human is connected, and not just the Japanese. Every human on Earth is connected.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, really obvious in Japan. And their relationship with nature and animals and plants and the environment.
And just the city environment, even just like city streets, right?
And spiritually as well.
Yeah.
Because of all the Shinto temples just everywhere. And it's just like, oh, you're a businessman going to work, stops at the temple. Okay, and then goes. It's just that is just a very, very normal thing in Japan. We saw it all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to here in the United States and in, I guess, most, if not all of the Western world, it's not. We don't see the oneness. We see me, myself, and maybe my group. And my group might be my family, my company, my political party, my religion, my
you
whatever.
You almost have yourself segregated between these groups as well.
Right.
Not just like one group. You like almost have these different self...
identifying groups?
Yeah, but like within you split yourself up into these micro-identities.
I'm me, I'm me, the husband, I'm me, the father, I'm me, the Republican or Democrat, I'm me, the Catholic or the Muslim, I'm me, whatever it is. There's all the different me's.
Yeah, but the me is
but when you define yourself as any of those things, there is of course the other. There's what is me, and then everything else that is not me.
Yeah. But think about it. What I was trying to say is the me is actually segregated. You segregate the me
Into all those different things?
into all the
I mean,
components.
that's
right?
true too.
To some extent, that is the inner reflection of our being that has us segregate ourselves. This is a silly example, but like I know I have done this. But I went. I used to be acquainted with someone, and I went to like their party one time, right? And her party was like her friends from like college-ish age, and like and I go in there, and then like it's just basically this group of people that I'm brand new to, but they have known each other for years, right? Now I'm in there, and the comment they make, oh, it's so interesting that she brought you here because we are like a designated group that she never allows to mend with any of her other groups.
Sounds very friendly and welcoming.
Well, right, but that was an observation. It wasn't like you're not welcomed here. It's funny because she never does this. She never crosses this group with any of her other groups, right? And right, but what that is you have a designated identity in that point that you keep, and in this case, continue to have it thrive in that time and space, right? Where you are identified as X for this group of people. And then basically when you get together once a year, twice a year, as kind of like a remnants of the past, you plop into that reality or that identity. And the reason why it's hard for you to start to mend people, right? Like in my case, I made it in there, but people are like, oh gosh, this is like the first time we see anybody other than this group, right?
Yeah.
It is, because the reality that you present forward as this human being here and that human being there has hard time crossing over. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a very hard crossover that you do not identify with because your inner self is segregated.
Yeah.
Quite literally segregated away from oneness.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the core thing is that if it's me versus anything or any group of me's versus anything, then it's not oneness.
But in this case, it's not even anything. It's your inner self cannot bring yourself to put in your full wholeness, your full identity into here, and then also have the full identity in here, right? Quite literally, you bring chunks of yourself here.
Sure. Well, that just makes it worse. Sure.
No, well, it's better because you're not against others. You're against your own integration into oneness, right?
I mean, you're still against others because if you identify as a Democrat, then you're against the Republicans. If you identify as that doesn't mean you're out fighting, but you're looking out for the interests of your group at the expense of oftentimes the expense of the other group.
Yeah, well, that's the obvious one to where you are obviously showcasing harm into the world. But in this case, there's no harm.
Well, I mean,
in this case, there's self-harm. The segregation that the self is experiencing is self-harm. And then therefore it reflects later into if you're an aggressive being that is going to take this and put out this action, this inner segregation out, then yes, you can see how it could go into the world as communal harm, right? Or nation harm or whatever.
Yeah.
But for the most part, to start with, it is important to recognize it is self-harm. It starts with self-harm. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
In this case,
I hadn't thought about it like that before.
In this case, because this individual was harming themselves to segregate themselves into these acceptable chunks, like, oh, this version of me is acceptable here, therefore this is my truth here. And this version of me is acceptable here, therefore it's my truth here. And because through that inner self-segregation, you're not whole.
Right.
And then therefore nothing you can do could possibly actually communicate wholeness out.
Right. I mean, I think we all do that.
Oh yeah, no, this is very
right?
standardized, but it starts with self-harm.
Yeah. The work me is different from the home me is different from the friend me.
Yes, but
to varying degrees throughout my life.
When you and I started spiritual awareness path, right? That was one of the first things we noticed.
Yeah.
Is that, oh my gosh, look, I play these roles because I think I need to come into this space a specific way because I will only be accepted into this space a specific way.
Yes.
Right, but it's safety, right? Through the pain body of safety, you don't want to be rejected by the cumulative. And then therefore you segregate yourself. You put on a persona at work, or in this case, at this party, or versus, this church gathering or whatever.
Yeah.
And you put on a persona. And then because it's a persona and it's kind of a gameplay that you do in order to segregate yourself, you don't want the two worlds to cross because they will see the discrepancy between the two.
God forbid your work friend goes to your church and then you're like, oh, wait, am I supposed to be work Elliot or church Elliot with this guy? I don't know.
Right. But so that is one of the first things you notice. But what is that a representation of is segregation away from wholeness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so from the Western world, I think that is our nuance that we don't recognize is that we are segregated.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Right.
Starting with, physically, you obviously can see this in the stories. Like, oh, look, here's my identity in work, and here's my identity at church, and here's my identity with my friends. And, and when I go at night to the club, here's my identity. Do you know what I mean? Like, those are very obvious things that you can physically see as an outflow of you. But they are kind of like the easy strings to start to pull.
Yeah.
With the question one is, why do I have all of these sub-identities? And then the answer is going back to, 3 podcasts back to all of the narratives is because it feels unsafe for me to stand out or to become different than I think that this group needs to perceive me.
Right. And that's the key, is that what you think the group needs to see. What was really interesting is as we started our spiritual development and those things became clear that, oh my gosh, look how much I've been changing myself, my behavior, my actions, my, whatever, to fit in with this group or that group or whatever. And none of them are me. None of them are my true self. And that just kind of added on to the burden of not liking myself in the first place. I was just like, I don't like myself, and I don't like the not myself that I've been pretending to be too. That's even worse.
But that's maybe the first step towards the right.
No,
unraveling.
I think it is the first step. It's
when you first recognized that, oh wait, I don't like me because I'm actually not me, or I don't like me because I don't even know who me is. It's a really difficult thing to face to begin with, but that is the beginning of the spiritual journey, as far as I'm concerned. That is when the eyes open for the first time, and it's as much as it sucks. This is what I want to say. As much as it sucks to be in that place, the grace there is. Oh my gosh, you are on the right path to wholeness. The second you are allowing yourself to admit, "Fuck, I suck ass," that is the greatest place to be. Even though it sucks ass, like you are right there where you need to be because it's not the end of the road. It's actually quite literally the beginning of something new.
The whole I don't even know who I am.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, that was my existential crisis. That was yours. Everybody who goes on this path hits that. But I think that largely stems from the fact that we divide ourselves up into these different personas and are never really true to ourselves, which means we're never really true to anybody else as well.
Yeah. We say this again, not as a judgment, but as going back to our three podcasts back.
I'm sure I still do it. To some degree.
Because that is the personal narrative that keeps us safe.
Yeah.
So this is going back to the unsafety and value. This is going back to the episode on consciousness. This go back on the episode on the larger truth and awakening. All of these, and then I think there's an episode in between that I don't remember the name of. So for all 4 episodes are just discussing this. That is our way to design the parameters of safety to limit our reality to where if we don't know what we are and if we don't know what it is for us to be open and intuitive and whole into the world, because we have come to perceive the world as unsafe, this is what we designed in order to really survive, in our case, into our 40s.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for that, you and I never would have made it in, at age of whatever, 35, when I had the dream. And all of a sudden I'm like, fuck, I suck ass. And I have no clue what the fuck is happening. I would have not made it to that point if I did not design this positive, what I call psychosis, or if I have branched off life in a segregated way in order to make it to age of 35. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's all perfectly normal in the sense that that is just what we do as humans, especially in the Western world, in order to stay, I will say sane, but like actually we insert ourselves into insanity so we can survive, because sanity at the time is maybe beyond our reach or too scary to even face.
Right.
For whatever reason. Maybe we're not wise enough. Maybe the world is not conducive to exploring larger brushstrokes of enlightenment, or whatever.
Sanity is overrated.
Yeah, where sanity within itself is almost like this negative connotation to like if you think anything other than this, therefore you're unsafe. And so by default, it eliminates as a very prejudiced blanket statement. It eliminates any possibility for anything outside of this norm, which obviously quite literally is broken.
Yeah,
right.
well,
It's
that's
a
the
way
thing.
to keep the system broken.
Yeah, all the. I'll just go ahead and say all the problems, most, but probably all the problems are because the system is broken. The way it's designed, the way it's been implemented, the way it's existed over, the way it's developed into modern society is broken in so many ways. But at the same time, we're all part of the system, and we all live and work and survive in the system. And so it's like, well, it's unsafe to continue to feed the beast, but it's unsafe to break away and try to not to. And they're both unsafe in different ways for different reasons, but they're both unsafe. Now, personally, trying to break off feels right in almost in like a absolute moralistic sense. But at the same time, it's like, well, you got to make money. You got to, deal with people. You have to, pay taxes. You have to do all these things which are not bad in and of themselves, but they are, properties of the modern world.
The broken system.
The broken system.
Yeah. Yeah, but to tie that back, the reason why there are properties of the broken system is because broken human beings designed the system.
Yes.
Right.
That's it. I mean, either accidentally or on purpose to justify, whatever behavior, to justify making money,
unsafety.
to justify, right? Because
all of this is like I was thinking, we have spent the last week like diving into enormous amount of nuance of like all kinds of stuff, right? And I thought, all of it, you could spend lifetimes and lifetimes talking about the nuance, right? And trying to understand the nuance and trying to understand the psychosis or psychiatry or the social behavior models behind it. And that's fine. We can spend lifetime trying to figure out why from all kinds of standpoints. Like, right, like you can take all of these little threads and go into this little ball of yarn and then like go, okay, well, which one is right? But I think at the core of the ball of yarn really is unsafety.
Yeah.
Like none of it actually matters as long as we walk around staying blind to the core vibratory frequency of just each individual human being feeling innately unsafe
Yeah.
in their perceived reality.
Right. And that explains why we are where we are in the world, is that these systems have derived from various feelings of unsafety over the years and become more and more entrenched as the working within the system feels safe. You get some sort of safety, whether that's social safety, whether that's more money, whether that's power, whether that's whatever. It makes sense why you would continue to do that, right? That feels safe. But it's all this false safety. It's all this, you're never going down to, no one ever goes down to, why do I feel unsafe in this?
Right, like unsafety, right? We've talked about this, but like unsafety can be seen from the physical standpoint as very like realistic. Like you would look out into the world and you can physically, through your eyes, through your physical senses, find something in the world that feels unsafe, that you be like, oh, well, obviously that is unsafe, right? And so you would put zero question to this idea of like, yes, this is unsafe. But nobody ever then goes, well, it exists, right, for me to see as an outflow of my inner self, right? My inner self that is vibrating in resonance with what I see. And thus, instead of me addressing it, which is like, sounds like insanity. It sounds like, oh, instead of me addressing this unsafety, I'm not saying, look, there's a bus coming for you, stand in the way and think, wait, what did I do to cause this bus to get ready to hit me?
Right.
I'm not saying that. I mean, obviously step away from the bus, but look at it as an opportunity. Fuck, I just almost got hit by the bus. I wonder what within me brought in this circumstances, vibratory circumstances into my reality. We need to reverse the cause and effect into the world.
I would almost make a distinction between like the acute unsafety, like, oh, there's a bus coming at you, and the chronic unsafety that is just, everybody has lingering in their lives at all times.
Yeah, but everybody's blind. Even if it's chronic, like the bus coming at you, let's say, is acute.
Yeah.
But like chronic idea of like, wait, I will not have enough food to survive the winter. Right? Like I could relate to that one, right? Like, oh, will we have enough potatoes and onions to make it through the winter?
Yeah.
That's not, I say it's not chronic. It is kind of chronic in the sense that I have, like, for some reason always felt that. And so at home we have a lot of potatoes and onions all the time. Right? But then underneath of it all is the child within me that has a narrative of survival at its core. And that's chronic on its own level, like deceptively hidden subconscious unsafety, right? So yes, there's all these levels. There's like acute bus coming at you. Oh, I don't feel like there's enough food, therefore I overbuy. And then therefore, in order to even keep myself from feeling the fact that within my subconscious at all times, I'm operating this lesser than standpoint of, will I have enough potatoes for, to last me through the winter?
Yeah.
And that is where, everything we have been saying is that is where the truth lies. And that's subconscious, that as a child, you have programmed yourself into lesser than in regards to food. And then therefore my reality that I face forward is always looked through the lens of that threat. Yeah. I'm quite literally seeing the world through that threat.
Right. And yours, makes more sense than mine, because yours was actually physical safety, and mine is, I didn't feel loved, which, you're not going to die from, but at the same time, it sure felt like I was going to die from it. So it was,
but it's both, even though mine might be real, they're both over exaggerated.
They're both over exaggerated, but I think they both do the same thing inside the body. I think they both, you squirt out cortisol and adrenaline, and it slowly kills you from the inside out.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's, I'm afraid of the saber-toothed tiger, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get love, or I'm afraid I don't have enough money, whatever it is, it doesn't, or I'm worked up about being in traffic. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's all, as far as your, primitive brain is concerned, it's all the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on the scale of things, yours is at least more legitimate than mine is. But
I have plenty that are like etheric as well. Like I have one, like not being wanted, right? Means nobody will take me out of my orphanage. And if no one takes me out of my orphanage, it's unsafe. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's not but yeah, all of it goes into this thread, this ball of yarn that is at the core of it. It's just a vibratory pulsation of unsafety, unprocessed from childhood. That's what I want to say. It's all these threads feed into it, but it's in the long run, it's very nebulous because logically none of it makes sense. But it's locked in there as this very exciting, very pretty little ball of light. That is the density.
Yeah.
Last night I had a weird, I had a strange dream, but I think this comes back into perspective, which I will say it, and I think it will lead us into something. So we build a new house, right? Which is really strange, and then it's on a smaller lot. And then for some reason we are going to be moving into it. But a lot of times I have dreams of moving into the new house, right? And there's an inside of the house, which I distinctly am aware of. And then there's the outside of the house, right? And then there's the in-between, which I'm like, okay, that is not a perspective that we have right now.
Yeah.
Right? I can perceive the inside. I'm very familiar with what it feels like to walk inside of something and then have walls and colors and drywall and whatever it is in America, right?
Yeah.
And I know what it is to walk out of the house and then thus, see the outside, perceive the outside. But in this case, there's the outside, there's the inside, and there's the in-between. And the in-between is imagine, if the best way I can describe it, imagine taking the outer layer of brick out and the outer layer of the foam I say brick,
insulation.
The faux brick. The outer layer of that, the pink stuff that they put on before they brick. Sure.
Wrap.
Yeah. Imagine taking a tie back and exposing the inner layer of the house with the piping, but without, let's say, the structure that holds it together.
But it's probably not, 4 inches wide or 6 inches wide. In your perception of the dream, it's bigger than that.
What do you mean?
The volume of you're describing the inside of the exterior walls.
Yeah, sure.
But that's not a lot of volume in a house. It's this thin little slice of it.
Yes.
So it I don't know, this is your dream, but did it seem just as significant and important and big as the inside or the outside?
Well, the outside wasn't there, and the inside was the inside, and the outdoors was the outdoors. But the in-between was its own layer. It was its own perceptual layer of, piping, exposed, ducts, not ducts, but ducts, yeah. Exposed, right?
They don't often duct against the exterior walls if they can avoid it.
But we're not going to discuss the nature of proper construction here. But right, imagine if there's the section in between, right? And right, I'm not given the dream for any other reason than quite literally, instead of being outside and instead of being inside, I'm experiencing the nuance of in between.
Yeah.
Right.
And it feels like its own significant thing.
Just like you and I would identify the inside to be
Distinct from the
a
outside?
distinct place, and then we would identify outside to be a distinct place. Think about it. Your brain has this, this is the inside, and then therefore your brain has a check mark.
Different modes almost.
This is a whole other mode of operation that exists in between.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm giving this dream, and I spend a lot of time in this dream standing on the outside, knowing that there is the inside, but experiencing the in-between. Right? Like I'm not experiencing the great outdoors, and I'm not experiencing the indoors, but I'm experiencing the layer in between.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think transitory, the way it goes, right? If we can start to look into the nuance of our individualized perception, right? And we can very distinctly see, I think this is where it's going. A lot of people talk about wholeness and oneness and the reality, like, I'm enlightened being, therefore it's love and light. And then thus, right? Like I struggle with this all the time is whenever I'm in the wholeness, right? And whenever I'm in the oneness, then everything is perfect, right? By default, everything is oneness and wholeness. And then there's a lot of people who are basically completely, well, actually, maybe let me reverse the two. Like, so the inside, I don't know, it doesn't actually matter. You can look at it either way. So one of them is wholeness and oneness, and it's basically peace and tranquility, where everything is perfect because everything is on its way towards experience of oneness.
Do you want the metaphor where inside is perfect because it's inside of you, or do you want the metaphor where outside is perfect because it's nature?
Yeah, right. But at the same time, nature is, do you know what I mean? So it doesn't actually, metaphorically, doesn't make sense, right? And so the world spend a lot of times recognizing that there is such thing as oneness and wholeness. And then thus the path to achieving it, or the chase to achieving it, or whatever you want to do to achieve it, right? And then the world spend a lot of time, and we're very, very familiar with this, and this is kind of the story of human race for the last 2,000 years or so, if we're talking about from time and space continuum, is we don't even look on the inside. It's the la 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 land, and we're out there frolicking in oblivious bliss of anything other than us living through our pain body and our unsafety, and then la 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 la. The entire world is just basically me not addressing the fact that it exists, right?
And crafting the world, usually subconsciously, to mitigate it.
Sure. But it's the la la la, Sam Smith level land out there. The song about the la 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 la. Yeah, when the words are hurting, I go la la la.
Okay.
It's kind of like the frozen, conceal, don't feel, don't let it show. The avoidance of seeing the inner being, right? And then there's the world of, here's the perfection of the enlightened guru or enlightened Buddha or, Krishna or Jesus or I don't know, whoever else just was enlightened enough to where there's this peace and tranquility. And we almost have taken the world and segregated it into these parts to where like you are familiar that there is such thing as enlightenment and there's its own concept. And you're familiar with such thing as the la 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 la, and it's either you're admitting that you're in the la 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 and then choose to be so and don't give a fuck about anything else, or you are clueless that there's anything other than the la la la, right?
La la land.
Sure. But this dream, I think, is the message that the space between the la 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 land and the enlightenment is the scaffolding between, right? It is quite literally the conduit into both.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Right? And so from that, if I can extrapolate the dream, I would say that we need to dive into the space as its own perceptory way of being, a way of living, or a way of
its own mode.
its own mode.
Is that in order to help us get from La La Land back to the inside? Is it a stepping stone?
Well, see,
along
that's
the
the
way?
thing is we see currently, like how have I been looking at it is, right? There's the chase for the inner peace and tranquility.
There's a chase for that. That's true.
And then there's it's either you're clueless or you're in avoidance of
Right.
in the La La Land, right?
And none of those are peace and tranquility. The chase for peace and tranquility is not peace and tranquility.
Yeah, right. But if we recognize that there's this whole in between, it doesn't. And I don't want to start drawing metaphors to where like, oh, well, the wall is therefore solid and this wall is therefore solid. The in between is the raw exposure of everything that is delicate that we are trying to protect from both the inside and the outside, right? The rawness, right? Because it's raw, right? Guess what? It's not pretty to see the ductwork on the inside. So we shield away from it. And if we have the ductwork and the wiring exposed to the outside, it's also not safe, right?
Right.
So we shield this intersection, the inner in between, and almost go, protect it, wrap it around, conceal, don't feel, more so. And we don't want it to be its own place. And so maybe the stretch that I'm trying to ask here for is to be comfortable with the space in between, to recognize this as its own space. And it's okay to start spending time in that space.
It's like a transition area.
Yeah, but a transition area to see the benefit of just being there. Benefit of seeing the rawness, benefit of seeing the pain, your own suffering, the suffering of others, your own and deficiency or insufficiency, and just seeing that the ugliness that you first come to identify within yourself of like, fuck, I suck ass, right?
I guess if you're in that space, then you are not in the other space. And you can see, maybe from that space, you are able to see more clearly, oh, this, I guess, outside in this example, outside world is really fucked up because look at what we're doing. And the inside is like, oh, I can see how that's a goal, but at the same time, maybe I can see how, relentlessly pursuing that goal is fucked up in its own way.
Yeah.
And to make, because pursuing it is not it.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of funny, but this is going back to anytime we hear the podcast, every single time we've heard Daniel speak, one of the things he keeps on repeating nonstop, which is so funny to me, is the Tao Te Ching, right?
Yeah.
First verse, is that what he keeps on saying? Is that
I think it's the first one.
Is the Tao that can be named is not the Tao?
Yeah.
Right. Which is basically this, right? Like the inside, the tranquility, the wholeness. If you are pursuing something, it is not it.
Right.
But going through this in between state has to be its own cognitive or subconscious or a world of okayness. You have to be okay being in this rawness and this in between state and see it as its own transitory phase, not with the goal to get anywhere and not to the goal to get to the inside, because the inside is its own space, and not to the goal of not being on the outside, but just be okay being in the middle.
Yeah.
And in the middle, when I would say it's not a place for A to B, it is its own space of being.
The way you just described, like trying to achieve enlightenment or achieve inner peace or something, it's the same thing we do like in the world, in business. I got to achieve the sale, I got to achieve the quarterly numbers, whatever. We take that same mindset and we're like, okay, well, I'm really good at making money and I'm really good at whatever else, cranking out widgets or whatever you're good at. Oh, okay, well, now I'm going to go apply that same philosophy, same mindset to spiritual development, enlightenment. I'm going to go read every book, and I'm going to go watch every interview, and I'm going to conquer this thing.
But
we bring that same mind. I guess that's obvious. I just realized that.
Oh, you just realized that? No, I have realized that about myself. I think I have said this on the podcast, is that with me,
I mean, yes, us, but I mean, everybody,
Well-
especially when you first come into the spiritual development world, you don't know any better. So you just, whoa, this has always worked for me. I'm just going to apply it here too.
yeah. And to some extent, that is the only place you know where to start, because it's the only
Right.
thing that you know.
And I guess doing it here is probably better than,
Not doing it.
not doing it. Or
because sooner or later, even if you're doing it in this like tenacious, close-minded, tense way, if you just chug along with it, this is kind of, I'm not promoting it starting that way, but if you happen to be the type of person that has this tenacity in order to overcompensate for the feeling of unsafety, which is what I had, it seems to be that after enough time, even if you're doing it in the wrong way, sooner or later something clicks inside going, oh, look, I have been doing this in the wrong way.
Right. I mean,
but that's fine, because it still got me to where I am today, to even be able to see and recognize that.
Yeah.
That is the tendency. I'm not saying I'm not there already, but I notice I'm aware enough to where I see the tendency.
Yeah. To me, there was this idea of, oh my gosh, here I am, 40 years old, just figuring this out. I've got to make up for lost time, so I have to like double down on it or something, which is just more unsafety.
Yeah, no, but to begin with, you bring the same, trauma frequency into whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Even if it is spiritual or enlightenment or seeking of gnosis or wisdom or whatever. Right. But this is great. I want to say this is great. This is not anything wrong. You can be familiar with that. Just, oh yeah, that is the tendency. But it's because you're still in the beginning phases of not even knowing how to behave any differently. So it's almost like you're retraining yourself into something that you have never known before, right? Like I was thinking how great it is that, like, to be okay with the recognition that even though we are where we are right now, I might die never truly
being enlightened.
Being enlightened. I mean, one, there's no such thing as enlightenment. That thing that I thought I was going after in order not to feel whatever seems to be almost have only been there in order to mitigate the unsafety.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, if I just become more wise, if I become more aware, if I just become more X, the chances are then, I'm just relaying it from back then, it probably made me feel better about the generalized unsafety that I felt this world to be.
Yeah. My old naive view of enlightenment was that I was happy all the time.
Yeah.
And I think Daniel actually on one of those podcasts, I don't remember which one, said, yeah, that's not the ideal state either. Just blind happiness is not.
Right? Well, the happiness is there because you don't feel happiness to begin with.
Well, and that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted.
Missing.
Because I was not happy, and so that's why I was chasing that.
Yeah.
But that's not a realistic state. B, that's not even a healthy state. And C, I don't know that that's an achievable state without, I don't know, drugs or something. And even then, that's not real happiness.
No, but happiness is at that point is measured against the other side of it, which is not happiness, which is how you feel. And as long as you are continue to chase of what is it that you do not feel, as opposed to how you actually feel, you're chasing the wrong thing. Because in reality, as long as you're chasing anything, you're not on the right path, correct? Right? But it's hard to, it is, right, to some extent, it's kind of a catch-22 there. How can you be working your way towards something in order not to be working your way towards anything? Do you see what I mean? Like, how, if you go back to the Tao expression, the Tao is the thing that cannot be named. So how can you be pursuing the Tao if it is something that is unnameable?
I think there's another one, the Tao that is known, or the Tao that is not the Tao, something like that.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
It's a paradox, but
It makes sense when you spend enough time on that path of gnosis.
It makes sense, but it's a paradox, but at the same time, it gives us a direction.
Yeah. So I would say to begin with, and this is not an excuse for blindness.
It's like your goal should be to know the Tao, knowing that you can never know the Tao. So, if you need a North Star, go toward that. Go toward more gnosis, more awakening, more self-actualization, realizing that 100% is physically impossible. But go that way anyway, because that's just the right way to go.
Okay, this is interesting because, our idea of 100% or walking towards something is quite literally the concept of our three-dimensional
right
phase of existence, right? In our phase, in our frequency band, there's a linear progression forward that is towards something. Like percentage is towards something.
Right. It almost doesn't make sense not to be going towards something. In the Western world, if you're not going towards something, you're falling behind.
Right, but we have trained ourselves into that belief system in order to feel safe. Right? If at the core of our being is this unprocessed nuance of unsafety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nebulous childhood unsafety of all kinds of crap that we never address. As long as we are allowing that to flow, that we will always believe that there needs to be progress forward, there needs to be remediation against, there needs to be a fight for, there needs to be action towards something.
Yeah.
But think about it, only because we are seeing and feeling the need to get away from something within us.
Things need to be different. We need to exert effort to make things different, because
different or even the continuation of the status quo. That is also right.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right?
That's true.
That is probably more important. So for those who cannot relate, feeling unsafe.
We either need to fight to change it or fight to keep it the same.
Yeah. But both of those are fights or struggles or plans or goals to alleviate what we actually feel inside, indoors, right? That is unsafety, right? The reason why we're closed off and we're protecting ourselves and there's this bubble and there's like a child crying inside this little enclosed house is because the child is trying to build as many walls as possible to feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Or to mitigate unsafety.
Yeah.
Right. Because it feels unsafe. It's interesting, right? Because like in that case, the thought process is the indoors is something that is constructed to keep the safety in.
Which one's indoor now?
So in this case, what I thought was the opposite. So the inside is the created narrative of the childhood that is perceived safety.
And the outside is
unknown.
Well,
in this, so right, you can take that metaphor and go out further. Outside is unknown and big and large and scary.
Right, it's tigers out there.
Right, but if you took that metaphor of the house and now extended it into this, it also works this way.
Yeah.
And so like the delayering of the walls is maybe ripping open and showing the scaffolding of the rawness that is the creation of a fake perception or fake world of safety that is the child created in order to keep itself from feeling overwhelmed. Right?
Yeah.
That positive psychosis episode that we talked about is basically, that is what we needed to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe to some extent, like, and as I'm exploring the dream further, like the fact that the walls are gone and I'm looking at the rawness is just like the chunk is like gone and I'm seeing the piping. Right. And I'm seeing through.
Maybe that's the place to be.
No, that is the place to be. The place to be is in the rawness.
Because then the inside and the outside, whichever way you want to look at it, are exposed and visible, and when the light has been shined on them and they're exposed and visible, they lose their, at least a lot of their power over you, right? In the same way that your Jungian shadow, when you shine the light on it, quote quote, it ceases to be the shadow and you integrate it. So by being in between, that's the only place where you can integrate the inside and the outside.
Yeah, but you almost have to be okay with the space of in between. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because it's see it as its own space.
It's not even an obvious place to go, right?
Yeah. In between,
right? Because what lives in the walls? Rats and bugs and monsters live in the walls.
There's no rats, mice.
Mice, maybe.
I don't like when people say rats.
Maybe
it ticks me off.
Maybe in New York.
I don't think there's rats in the walls in New York. What's up? What rats get all this terrible rap? What the heck? No, I have a thing about people disrespecting rats.
Okay, mice and bugs,
and that's still okay. Monsters. I actually, I obviously did not want them to destroy our walls, and we had a food supply that they completely destroyed and pooped all over it. But where are they going to go if it's cold outside?
Right, but that's back to the in the traditional Western mindset. Here's mice, and mice are not me, and it's me against the mice, and the mice are going to eat my food supply that I need to have in case
that we don't survive the winter.
In case I can't survive the winter, or there's a snowstorm and the grocery store is closed for a day. And so got to set the traps, got to set the poison, got to do all these things.
Yeah.
Or there's a oneness of, here's another living creature. Just like I'm a living creature, just like you're a living, just like the tree is a living creature. Maybe even just like the rock is a living creature.
Yeah.
And we're all here together. And I understand that they're hungry and they have little mouse babies and it's cold outside or whatever. And we're all just trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, right. But there's the rawness into that too. One, in order to be able to see compassion into the mouse or into the rat, you have to first feel compassion within you.
Yeah.
And recognize that, look, this hits me on a particular level that is striking something within me.
Right. And empathy.
Empathy. But then at the same time, if you have not given yourself empathy, how can you give empathy to somebody else, much less a rat or a mouse?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like the reason why, on that show, that Portal show, there was the African-American guy who was raised in like a terrible home situation where his mom was a drug addict, the dad was dead. And then he, like at an early age, started breaking into houses and then like basically joined a gang, I think.
Yeah.
And started holding people at gunpoint when he was old enough to hold the gun. And he's basically like honestly, like could die probably in his teens because he's in a terrible situation.
And he got arrested, went to court, and the judge was like, "You ever thought about joining the military? Because that's probably your only way to A, to not see me again, and B, to stay alive." And so he did, and that probably saved his life.
Yeah, right. And so the Portal show was kind of had these arcs of these people's lives to show them how they got to the point of, I'm not saying the awakening, right? I'm not saying that they are awakened, but how they are on this path of in between, how they're able to sit in the rawness of this in between, right? And seeing the rawness of their house or of their inner self, and then be okay with that space, right? Just being okay with that space.
Yeah.
Right. And then at some point, I think towards like the last episode, he talks about running into a homeless woman on the streets that had like children with her, and then he felt sorry for her, and so he wanted to give her money, and she said, I don't need your money. I just want food for my children. And like, he quite literally, as he's retelling the story, he breaks down crying. I think he actually recorded himself on his iPhone. So knowing that this is going to make it into the footage, in that raw moment of after he left the woman.
Yeah.
Because he saw himself as that child.
Right.
His mother, who at the time he did not feel like was there to defend and protect him. And he felt alone on the streets,
Right.
having to mow yards at the age of 5 in order to even get food. He saw himself as these children, right? And so that crying, that rawness of this grown, by a ginormous man crying, was super real because he allowed that rawness of in between, that space in between, to be his truth. And what's important I want to say is maybe that what I want to emphasize here, needs to be seen as its own space that you are okay spending a lot of time in.
Yeah.
Not a place of before and not a place of where I'm going to be after. That needs to be seen as its own space that we need to be actively okay walking into, actively experience all the time, and then actively recognizing that I'm okay being in this space. I'm not saying this is the end. I'm not saying this is a beginning. I'm not saying anything. Walk into that space and make yourself okay with being raw, which is not something that, especially in the Western world, we're ever taught.
No, in fact, if anything, we're taught to avoid it.
We're taught to avoid it,
to gloss over it, to there's no time to feel that. You need to work, or you need to go buy a Ferrari, and that way you don't feel that. Just whatever it is to avoid feeling that.
Yeah.
Whether it's stuff, whether it's activities, whether it's drugs or alcohol, that's not. I think especially for men, it's we don't have time for any of that touchy-feely stuff. We got work to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. Whatever parts of our gnosis that we happen to be on, I think you're in a similar space that I am, but I'm noticing myself struggling with it just because I don't have like a built-in pathway into this functionality, right? So to begin with, because the world is unsafe, and that is right now I'm looking at it from the rhetoric of reverse, right? The rhetoric that I built for myself is, okay, the world is unsafe and I feel X, which is really unsafety, right? My entire system is feeling unsafe. And in my case, then it went into, oh, this feels vulnerable. I feel vulnerable, right? And then vulnerable, in my case, is more unsafe. If you're vulnerable, you're more unsafe. Now, I don't know how...
Your unsafety leads to vulnerability, which leads to more unsafety,
yes.
which leads to more vulnerability, which leads to more unsafety.
Yes. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So like for some reason, the psyche has programmed within itself that vulnerability is also unsafe. And so therefore to be perceived as, or then to maybe even to feel vulnerable means you're not actually prepared to act a specific way in order to offset the feeling of unsafe, in order to make yourself safe.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, right. So the rhetoric is, I feel unsafe. That is coming out of childhood trauma, right? Of all of us having this unsafety as our truth. And then my ways of dealing, and I'm hoping this is helpful to someone, that feeling unsafe makes you vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, option one is if something comes at you, guess what? You're not dealing you're not surviving while you're vulnerable, right? And two, vulnerability leads to more unsafety, which is convolutedly goes back into this is another justification why feeling vulnerable is not safe. And so therefore you do the opposite of what you actually feel, which is kind of going back to psychosis, but I'm just showcasing my particular flavor of it. Then therefore, if I feel vulnerable and vulnerable is unsafe, you have to not feel vulnerable, which basically you have to suppress the feeling of the unsafety that you actually feel. And so you shut off your actual true flow of emotions and develop this automatic response into, I feel vulnerable, fuck. Don't feel vulnerable. total control, total suppression of emotions, and this is me. Like quite literally, this is me. And so over the last several weeks, what I've been noticing is I have input come in that would be triggering into unsafety, right? Like, it doesn't even matter how, but I notice it feeds into the pathway of unsafety. And my automatic response, my nervous system automatically, or my cognitive or subconscious system, I don't know, there's probably some sort of scientific name for this system, automatically responds with shut off this emotion, shut off how you actually feel, and put out a pre-programmed package of how you actually going to feel and respond, which is in no way true. In no way true. I noticed the override of the truth, and I noticed like me quite literally, it's like a package that I bloop into it. And I'm like, oh, look, I am experiencing something that I'm very, very familiar with. And it feels right because that is how I always behaved. This is the package, this is the software system that I would run the second I feel vulnerable. And then therefore I'm like, this is messed up because all of a sudden I'm feeling like it has all of these, like, oh, you feel unsafe? Run the system, feel safe, check. Oh, you feel like you want to cry? Run the system, no crying. Oh, you feel like you, I don't know, like there's all these nuances of unsafe. Run the system, you don't feel that. And so quite literally, this is magical because I'm seeing the system. I run an input that my body, my system, my software perceives as unsafe. I basically plop on a program, like a quite literally coded program that I have designed over the last, 20 years. 40 years, I guess, let's say, that automatically runs, that inserts all kinds of lies. Like the system is just a lie.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just runs and it starts to run and it overrides the feeling and then thus inserts in a false narrative of safety.
Right. I mean, and
I feel it to the core. I think, well, I say this and I want to emphasize this. I think quite literally everybody does this.
Right.
It's just I'm feeling like the nuance of how it works.
Now you're aware of it.
Yeah, but I'm aware of the system itself. Like I'm aware like, oh, look, input deemed as unsafe, override the feeling, initiate, protocol X. Protocol X overrides the input and pretends like I'm now feeling Y. And it's like so obvious. It's so obvious, one. But the two is, this is the funny part about it, is I don't know how to do anything other than that. And so when the input comes off, I'm feeling unsafe, and I choose not to run protocol X in order to override this, I still don't know what to do with the initial input.
But I think just being aware of it is like 90% of it. Because that's so hard for me. I also, over the last few weeks, have been, my awareness of how I feel, especially when it's something that is not a great feeling.
Oh yeah, it's easier to see what's not great.
Is heightened. And I'm more aware of what the input is, and then, yes, what that program is that would run. And it's really, it's interesting to see that and go, well, this is what I would just do this. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, it would be, I would just go get a drink, right? And then go, wait a minute, that isn't necessarily the right thing to do. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but to catch it and pause right there and give it some actual, thought and actually feel what it is that it's poking at.
Yeah, but I want to say what this is choosing to be okay in that rawness.
Yeah.
That's what this is, right?
Yeah, take some time and be there with whatever that input is. The input's poking your unsafety button at some level. Yeah. Here, there, whatever. Be there and feel it and, become friends with it.
Yeah. Like see that as its own space. Instead of saying, oh, this is a space of like no square, or this is a space where, to begin with, you would just not even know that space exists. But at this point, you have to recognize it's its own space, and possibly maybe the space that we need to spend the most of our time in. Not inside hiding as a wounded child, not on the outside in the la la land where we pretend like we're not wounded, but in between where it's super raw.
Yeah.
And exposed. Heck, when we started this podcast, that was like, I think in episode 1, I said this. I'm like, the goal is to basically showcase, I didn't use the word rawness at the time, but basically the path to self. And then maybe if somebody perceives it as raw, then that's fine. But it's important to showcase it because this is the path that everyone is taking or will be taking, or who chooses to take this path. This is all the feelings that come on along the way and all the nuances that come along the way that one, like I have never even perceived or even thought that existed. But now that I'm in that space, I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know how to behave because I have spent 40 years trying not to feel it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also like any muscle or habit. The more you do it, the easier it gets and the better you get at it.
As far as being able to feel what you're...
being able to be there, being able to feel it, and then being able to make a better choice as to your reaction to it. Not just someone cuts me off in traffic, so I go flip them off and try to, run them off the road or whatever. I go, oh, well, look at this. I'm really triggered by some guy in traffic. Let's sit here and feel what that's actually poking. Oh, ... It's actually poking. I feel disrespected. ... Oh, when I was, a wee lad, I felt unseen by my parents, or whatever it happens to be. If you can make that connection down to where in childhood, that's the origin story of this, say, negative feeling.
Yeah, the trigger.
The bottom of that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can begin to release that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to when you were talking about with the guy from Portal. Well, that reminded me of in Daniel's podcast with Lex Friedman. He used a term that I hadn't heard of before called compersion. And so we know what like compassion or empathy is. It's, this person is suffering in some way, and I can kind of put myself into their position, and I know what that would feel like, and I want better for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But compersion is the other end of that scale where I feel good when they feel good. And it hadn't occurred to me that, oh yeah, that clearly is a scale from, I feel bad when they feel bad to I feel good when they feel good. And I don't think there's a lot of that in the world. Maybe there's empathy, right? The fact that charities exist shows that there's empathy to some degree. Maybe cynically, maybe not, but the opposite of this is of course jealousy. Oh, when they have something good, I feel bad. And there's certainly a lot of that. I think there's more of that than there is of compersion. And you feel how you feel.
Well, no, I don't know if this matters or not, but like the opposite of it is jealousy. But then I feel good when they are bad is sadism.
Yes.
So that's not the opposite. Yeah. That's like
there's the two scales. Is the jealousy to sadism scale.
Yeah, but most people don't recognize that is sadistic.
Yeah.
To feel happy when you see others suffer.
Oh, they crash their new car. Oh, that feels good because they maybe there's jealousy in that too.
Well, it's jealousy that they have a new car, but it's when something bad happens to the car, that's sadism.
Yeah.
Right, but most people don't classify that as sadism. Right. I don't know what they classify that as, but
that's right. He's like, that's that's psychotic. That's psychopathy.
Yeah, but to our point, that's I was
I was brought up in this world.
Yeah, but what I call positive psychosis, it is psychosis for the net survival. You invent this behavior for survival.
Sure.
Because you live in the world of lesser than.
Yeah. But when he pointed out that is like a form of psychopathy,
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, it 100% is. And yet, I have to admit, I get jealous, and sometimes it does feel good when bad things happen to other people.
Well, bad people, right? Like,
yeah,
right. Like you justify, like, oh, they're bad, and if bad thing happens to them, that's good. I feel good because they got what they deserve. Right?
Or sometimes even not so bad people. Oh well, and maybe that stems from jealousy too.
It's jealous.
But either way,
it's all jealous.
I recognize all of this is really shitty, and yet I can't pretend that I don't feel that from time to time. Less now, but that is a thing that is in human nature and is in my nature to some degree. And so
because you were raised that way.
Well, especially because I was raised that way.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, look, so-and-so has a new car. That's, there's this, family jealousy of that. And, they either they shouldn't have it or we should have something better. All that crap. But
it's difficult to be raised that way and just think of it as a total norm, not actually realizing that like it's coming out of a pain body.
And it's, yeah, right.
And then the second you grow up and you start to like analyze it, it's difficult to rewire yourself from that.
Right. That's where I'm going with this, is that since he said that, I'm hyper aware of all 4 points of these two axes of, jealousy to sadism, and then empathy or compassion to compersion. And it is so clear how compersion is the best of the best, right? But we just don't do that. Maybe you do it for your children. Okay, well, when my children do well and they get a good job or they do well in school, they're happy, and I'm also happy. Maybe less so we do it for our spouse or something, because I think there's a lot of jealousy in a lot of relationships. A lot of the people I worked with in the past were like, oh my gosh, my wife, if she made more than me, that would be terrible. Or sometimes they did make more, and that was just a point of contention. And it's like, but that's
well, it doesn't make sense, because in the long run, if this is a household, then there's net more money into the household.
That was how I always felt. Why it's more money is better than less money for the house.
Oh wait,
but it was just an ego. It was an ego thing because
it's
they're the man and they have to make more money and whatever. To actually genuinely feel happy when someone else is doing well and feeling happy feels so rare in this world. And when he was talking to Lex, that is the thing that we should be trying to optimize for in society, to more of that. I'm like, yes. And I'm thinking, how can I, it's not how can I trick myself into feeling more of that. It's how can I recognize when I'm feeling the opposite of that and bring awareness to it. Mm-hmm. And through that, hopefully move myself over to the other side of that scale. It's, it's like, the neighbor puts in a new pool. Are you happy about that or not? The neighbor gets a new car, the whatever. Not usually. Not the way I was brought up. It's really, it has become really apparent since he said that, and I've been noticing it.
To some extent, like a new pool is like there's jealousy that they have a pool and
there's
you don't.
Jealousy, yeah.
Or to some extent, it's like, oh damn, I'm gonna have to stare at it. But then there's like, oh, and then it will ongoingly strike a jealousy because like, oh look, they're having fun in their pool. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but it's all,
Oh, and
think
then,
about,
it's full of leaves. Oh, good. They don't have to clean it or something. There's all kinds of, it's really shitty. It's
But-
really shitty.
but it's all because it's unsafe, right? Like, or if they have a pool, they're doing better than you are. And if they're doing better than you are on the scale of wanting a pool, because I don't even want a pool.
I don't even want a pool either.
But if they're doing better than you are, then I'm trying to think of where it would even go.
Then they have more money and they have more resources.
And they have more resources. And so therefore, I am less safe than they are.
Comparatively, right?
Comparatively. Somehow you deem them to be in the better position and then therefore safer.
In some relative sense, my safety has gone down.
Safety, yes.
Because theirs has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Am I any less safe if there happens to be a pool 1, 2, 3 houses down? In an absolute sense, no, obviously not. But we can't help it but make it relative and comparative.
Yeah. I would argue that all of that entire box of sadism and judgment, and then compassion and compersion, all of that has to do with the parameters that you have set within yourself to be unsafe or to feel unsafe as a trauma, as a childhood trauma.
Right.
So all childhood trauma presents itself in which one of these rhetorics you feed.
Does someone else being hurt, does that make you feel more or less safe? If that makes you feel more safe, then that's sadism. If that makes you feel less safe, if someone else being hurt makes you feel less safe, then there's compassion. And if someone else is doing good, does that make you feel more safe or less safe? If someone else doing good makes you feel less safe, then that's jealousy. And if someone else doing good makes you feel more safe, then that's compersion. Oh, Billy Bob over there is doing well. That's great. I feel great for Billy, like genuinely happy that Billy Bob is doing great and is happy. I feel that way because that feels safe. Compersion.
Yeah, but I would argue we cannot feel compersion until we identify the fact that we innately feel unsafe from the childhood trauma.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You just can't. The only way you would be in any one of those things that is not compersion is if you are somehow operating on the lesser than, but lesser than just simply means unsafe, to whatever flavor of Kool-Aid you happen to be drinking that day.
Yeah.
Then that's it. And I wanted to point out that it is a flavor of Kool-Aid. It is not a real narrative. It's a narrative that you have held on to and designed to as a child in order to survive until whatever age you are right now when you're listening to this.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's I guess a point in the middle of being a sociopath where you don't care one way or the other if someone's doing well or poor. Oh, there's some starving kid on the road, whatever. Oh, there's some, person who's doing well, whatever. I don't know.
Like no feeling whatsoever?
No feeling whatsoever. It's like, and obviously, you go drive down the road and you see like a fancy house or you see a rundown house, and it's not like you have to have strong opinions about everything that you see.
But if you do have an opinion, that means it's a trigger. It's a trigger into unsafety. Yeah. That's what I want to say. If the mere nature of you seeing something and then feeling something for it.
Well, unsafety or safety, because if something is like overly safe, oh, here's oh, look, I just found a big sack of money. Now that feels really safe. There's a trigger there. Maybe you'd say it's a positive trigger.
Yeah. Nobody recognizes positive triggers.
No, those are easy to overlook.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This is I think a natural transition into what you just brought up. Yeah. If you just talk about that concept, right? We see the society operate so much on the jealousy or sadism scale, so much more, for the most part, than compassion, much less compersion. Yeah.
I had never heard that word before.
Yeah, I never either. But
which is a statement in and of itself, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, he said that. That's the fact that we don't even know what that word means.
Yeah, that should be taught very early on in school.
Yeah, we're just teaching the wrong thing. Yeah, but this is what I want to say is if you just look at the world at the way it is right now, and the reason why it feels so discouraging at times, like if you're diving into like the nuance of all the ways that you feel unsafe, there are so many of them, and they feed so many of these little ways of being, right? That it almost seems impossible to like, well, heck, how do we climb out of it cumulatively, and then much less individually, right? Like it seems impossible. What I'm saying is, it almost seems impossible for this to be solved, especially at the time frame that it needs to be solved, right? But I want to correct the perception, or at least the perception that I had, and to point out that, Lex brought up, now this was recorded 4 years ago, right? So like it was 4 years ago that they recorded that podcast, and Lex was like, well, love, right? Like the answer to it is love.
Mhm.
And I thought, yeah, like, yes, ...
Yes, but
But we have defined love so radically different. The definition of love, right? And it does exist, right? Like it exists, but there are so many nuances within it that, sometimes love, at least to begin with, is not love. It's just a it's just a
it's a pain body reaction.
it's a pain body reaction, or the perception of love is it ran through the pain body system. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So we have all of these wrong, and we recorded a lot of podcasts of what love is and what love isn't, and a lot of them were very radical based on my, I don't know, way to prove to myself that love exists. But right, so it is the right answer, but I want to say it needs to be qualified, because we have lost.
Well, to me, the existence of the jealousy sadism scale is a symptom of the separateness of society, of me versus them, or us versus them. And the idea of, compassion and compersion is you get there when you truly feel and believe and live in the oneness, right? If we're all one, then jealousy doesn't make sense and you don't feel it. And sadism doesn't make sense and you don't feel it. If everything, everyone is truly one, that feels like where love comes from.
Yeah.
And so you can't help but feel compassion and empathy for someone who's in a bad situation, and compersion for someone who's in a good situation, because it's as if it's you. You don't even have to try to put yourself in their position. You are in their position because you're all one.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I'm saying that works if you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. To me, yeah. What is it? The Inuits have like 100 different words for snow. There's this type of snow and there's that type of snow. And then we just have one word, love, which means everything from I love my dog to I love pizza to I love my wife to I love my kids to I love the movies.
And what I want to point out is when you and I started to go through this, right? And we started to unravel what is it that we actually feel for each other. What you thought was love was not love.
It was not love, no.
That's what I mean. So yes, most of us do not know what love is if we are a broken child screaming in a closed room inside, pretending like we're not screaming. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because our idea of love is just a way to seek comfort.
Yes.
That's what I want to say is that, yes, that is a great word and that is a great solution, but I want to clarify that it needs to be the true love, not the parameters that we have set up and think of as love right now.
There are a lot of things in this world masquerading as love that, even if they're good intentions, even if they're, they're good means or good ends, or even good means to good ends, that isn't necessarily actual love.
Yeah.
I love you and I buy something for you because I want you to be happy. All good things. But then I want you to be happy so that you will love me back, so that I will feel validated, so that I will feel whole as a person. It starts to get a little sketchy there. Right?
Yeah, but that's how we were.
Well, that's how
that was our relationship.
That was our
like
relationship.
the Instabot that came through today was basically that, right?
Which one was it?
That where you got me lipstick.
Ah.
Yeah, right? And you made me a drawing.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good thing. Like, you bought me lipstick, that brand of lipstick that I used to wear, and you made me a little love note, right? It's all great.
Yeah.
But it was all done for the wrong reason.
It was all done for the wrong reason.
So in the long run, honestly, just if you look at the energy behind it, it was all shitty.
Right. And that's the thing is it's subtle and it's nuanced. And it was for a long time for me hard to understand and hard to wrap my head around the subtleties there, until I started looking at it from a different perspective, like a more honestly more of like a oneness perspective, like and less of a what is this, how does this action make me feel better, which is basically another way of saying what pain body of mine is this trying to soothe.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so love is the answer, but I would be very careful about what is it that we identify as love, or right, and then truly rethink that. But you can't rethink that until you address the pain body, and until you address your childhood trauma of unsafety.
Yeah.
But interestingly, that's the only thing that needs to be addressed. Like, quite literally, the solution to all of this, as terrible as it sounds or as big as it might be, is to quite literally change the narrative from the inside out.
Right. I mean, Lex was right. And I think Lex probably means it from the proper definition, that the solution is love. The solution is add love to it, or bring love into it, or do it from a place of love. But
yeah, but it can. Yes, he probably means it from the right perspective, but meaning it from the right perspective and then knowing it how to do it yourself are two very different things.
Yeah, well, yeah. Implementing it is.
It can
tricky.
only be implemented from the right place. Knowing that it needs to be implemented, but recognizing that you are not there and you don't have the means to implement it is a very important distinction.
Yeah.
Right? I know that this needs to go this direction, but I'm not there yet. I might not be the right person to implement it.
Right.
There needs to be that recognition.
Or at the very least, you would have the wisdom to try to go out of your way to not do it in all the wrong ways that at least you can think of.
Yeah.
Restrain. Which is better than, just willy-nilly going, yeah, love is when I feel good because, I get attention from my wife. So that's love. I was full steam ahead on that definition.
Yeah. No, there needs to be, this is, a whole other side of this, but knowing the direction that it needs to go, but at the same time, owning your personal stance and recognizing you are not the person to do this, because even though you're not there,
I know we need to go north, but my personal compass is a little bit broken.
Yeah. And you have to be able to willing to let your ego out and down and stand down and let the people who actually have the compass working.
Yeah.
Set up the guidance.
Yeah. It's like,
which is right within itself is another reiteration of why until you dissolve or integrate your childhood trauma, no words, no actions no feasible change will come into the world, because the truth of your propagation, your conscious reach of potential into this world will only come from the amount of space you spend working on this in this uncomfortable range of self.
Yeah. And you won't be able to move out of that.
You cannot move the world forward if you have not spent enough space in this uncomfortable space.
Yeah. And the best you can do is bring the world up to your level of
consciousness.
Yeah, sure.
Wisdom, awareness, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right?
So we need the Buddha to come back and lead us forward.
But and I know this is slightly backwards, and I'm saying this obviously realizing that there's some judgment here, but the people who are in the position to make the difference, who have the means, who have the
political power,
monetary power, reach power to make the difference,
are uniquely unqualified, largely.
Yes, largely unqualified to be in the space, because their personal level of awareness, consciousness, wisdom, integration of their childhood pain body has not reached a level to where their personal frequency band can get us past the hump of where we're stuck. We're stuck at a frequency band. And we need to get past the hump.
I think that's another Tao Te Ching saying that, the best leader is the one that doesn't want to be a leader, or the one that is not visible as a leader, something like that. The people who end up in power, whether that's politics or business, at the top of the, totem pole of those things, often, maybe always, are there because of this. They're driven by some sort of pain body thing. And there's nothing wrong with drive in and of itself, ambition in and of itself, but it's there to soothe some sort of pain body.
Oh, yeah.
And so they are almost definitionally uniquely unqualified to lead us down a path of love or oneness.
Yeah, but
they're the worst people to do it.
I totally see myself as that, because I had so much drive to not feel unsafe.
Yeah.
That the skill set of that tenacity, I think I've said it on the podcast before, but the skill set of that tenacity that got me to the point where I am right now is solely responsible. I give all the credit to that drive.
Yeah. Feel unsafe and do everything you can to get out of unsafety. That is a very profitable way to live.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying in my case it's profitable. I'm saying it is very
successful.
Successful in some parameters of not feeling unsafe.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But the tenacity that it for me took to get to the point in our business, let's say, where we are right now, was solely there because of the unsafety that I felt as a child.
Sure.
And because of that unsafety, we're not living in poverty. We're not living on the streets. Because I spend 120% of my time making sure that is, running away from the demon that was never there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I was running and running and running and running.
Right. No, I mean, you've just described
so it works.
All high achievers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, not even high achievers. Just actually, everybody. I think everybody, to some extent, their reach into what Western world classifies as achieving is just different, right? Like monetary, crazy money, it was never my thing. My thing was to design the system of as much safety as possible, right? Like lock everything up into the parameters of safety.
Yeah. And
so that just happens to be my particular flavor of, my life expression right now is quite literally the extent of that, what we started this conversation with.
Yeah. I mean, achieve doesn't necessarily mean dollars in the bank.
Yeah.
But, there's so many examples of, great, successful sports figures who, rose to the top of their game. They're like, the most elite players in the world. And you trace it back down and it's, because dad said I couldn't, or because dad only loved me when I won the game, or because coach,
that was,
whatever.
Remember that on the portal, that was like one of they had like 5 or 6 different people, and then we went through their life story. One of the life stories was the girl who was like an elite runner.
Yes, that's right. She was going to compete at the Olympics.
Yeah.
And her dad seemed like he was.
Well, she said that
piece of work.
Her dad basically was, whatever.
Yeah. But it's all, they've achieved great success. But it's all driven from this really, really crappy thing. And it works, right? You can channel that into great success. People do.
Well, no, in her case, it's interesting, right? This is kind of just a side story, but in her case, she suffers a fall. Remember? Like they're celebrating themselves going to Olympics, and she actually injures herself.
Breaks her spine.
Yeah, and ends up not going to Olympics.
Right. She's like, I may never walk, let alone run again.
Yeah, they thought she could never walk, right? But that is the outcome of functioning and being driven towards something so heavily, like so rigidly, out of the wrong space.
Right.
That the semi truck that hits you on the side and all of a sudden your world flips upside down and you're in a new space is because that is what it took for you to see and have a reset.
Right. That's a hard bottom.
Hard bottom. But her hard bottom, right, comes when she's young in her early 20s, getting ready to go to Olympics.
Yeah.
And that was an opportunity basically to reset. I don't know if she did or not.
Well,
but
it seems like, because she was like, she was never comfortable in being alone and being quiet, not being able to do anything. And here she is basically recovering from full paralysis, or at least, lower half paralysis. And she's forced to lay there and recover and be with herself inside. And if you've never done that, that can be really difficult. It's like, just take some person who's never meditated and go, sit down for 10 minutes and don't do anything. It can be really hard, let alone, you're forced to do it because you've got some injury. And plus, that's another thing on your mind. Oh my gosh, I was a professional runner. All that has disappeared potentially.
Yeah. No,
that's a lot.
I say that just because later on she said that she went on to marry someone who was basically a copy of her father.
Oh, that's right.
All right. So yes, something changed, but not enough, obviously, in your 20s in order to change the trajectory of your life. And only in her 40s does she realize, oh, I need to leave this man because he's quite literally just an extension of what my father is. But that's how everybody marries, like the extension of their father or their mother or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which, like I told you thousands of times, I do not want to be extension of your mother.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that I have those, right? You married me because I had the same tendencies of unsafety that would cause you not to speak up because you would not have a voice.
Yeah.
And in my case, me controlling all aspects of my life was, there to keep me safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. So to go back this kind of a side line, but yes, love is the solution, but it starts with self-love, right?
Yes. Yes. There's that. Was that on the one of the episodes as well, where they talk about
our episode?
One of the Daniel episodes that we saw. That
I don't know.
You maybe it was on a different show, but I've heard it so many times. Is that you have to get your own stuff in order before you can help. I mean, you can still help, but you really need to be in a good place yourself before you can help get anyone else to a good place. And that applies to like all aspects of your life. If you literally have very little money and you're giving all of it away, that is, you're not helping yourself at all. You're going now you're in a worse position. Now you have to go spend extra time to make up for it. That's not a sustainable thing to do. To self-sacrifice yourself so much that you're literally killing yourself in order to help someone else is not a sustainable, healthy thing to do. But if you can get yourself into, that's not saying don't help anyone until you have $10 million in the bank. That's not what that means. But you need to be in a healthy place to help bring other people up to a healthy place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, healthy place, right? Like, going back to the beginning, you have to actualize yourself into your truth, to recognize what your truth is.
I mean, that's what I
Admit
mean.
to the fact that you might not know what the truth actually is, and then start chugging towards something that intuitively feels right, that is on general trajectory of just knowing thyself, right? You don't have to know what thyself is, right? The Tao is you, right? That you are the Tao.
Yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out.
No, in fact, is you
need to at least be aware that you don't have it all figured out, and be heading. Maybe your compass is broken, but at some point you get a good enough compass that well, this somewhere north somewhere over there and south somewhere over there. So I'm going to head that way because that's northish.
No, to begin with, right? In my example of, like, I know the system that I could run in order to shut off all the unsafety triggers or all the red flags that my system is feeling whenever I have some sort of trigger, right?
Yeah.
I just can at least know, okay, this is what the system wants to do based on these triggers of unsafety. And if nothing else, recognize that, and then don't run that system.
Yeah.
But instead of going, what if I just sit there with myself for a little bit, right? And I think part of me, I know I have this, is I don't like feeling uncomfortable so much that I want to have a solution right away in order not to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And running the system is the easiest thing I can do in order to block off and go into the la-la land where this is not my truth.
Yeah.
And that Western perspective of just running away from the uncomfort as fast as possible because it sucks ass to feel uncomfortable is my response. Like the impatience.
Yeah.
Like the impatience, right? And so the reason I say this is really hard for me to just go, it is okay to feel uncomfortable, and it is okay not to know what the right behavior is. And it is okay to say out loud right now that the only thing I can do right now that I even know how to do is just not run this system, which is obviously wrong, but just be in the moment of feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's what my dream of rawness is. It's just that.
Not to complicate it, but you may not know what the right thing is, but you may not even know but even if you do, you may not know what the right reason to do the right thing is. Just to add more complication to it.
Yeah, which is fine. But that just, one, being okay with feeling uncomfortable. Two, being okay with not having to do anything about it, which is what my control thing is, right? Like, oh, okay, if I can't run the system, I'm going to have to figure out a really quick solution over here. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I could see how that would be my tendency to know that, okay, I shouldn't do this, but I very quickly need to know what to do. And just recognizing that that's okay to be in a space where it is okay that you don't know what to do. And think of how stupid this sounds, but this is my truth. At my age, 40 something, I'm only now learning how to behave appropriately, or at least not inappropriately, towards a true feeling that I have.
Yeah. And
going, oh, look, I have this feeling. I recognize that I want to run away from it. And I recognize that just being with it is really, really difficult and almost feels impossible.
Yeah.
And I literally have to calm myself down and go, what if you just lean into it? And the leaning into it is really difficult for me. I have never practiced leaning into it. And so being in the space where I'm leaning into it is really difficult, because the panic mode that actually runs inside whenever you lean into this raw space of discomfort feels very threatening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm experiencing that multiple times a day. And I'm having to basically almost
yeah.
I don't know. I think quite literally my eyes cross in some way. My brain kind of it farts itself into some sort of weird space. And then I have to I'm a 40-year-old learning how to feel for the first time, maybe.
So sometimes I don't want to say instead of leaning into it, but in order to force myself to lean into it, there's some trigger, and my default reaction is to do X, but I will almost go out of my way to do the opposite of X because that will make it more uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, I would have done X, and I know that X is just a way around it, a way to ignore it, a way to bury it, a way to suppress it. So whatever the opposite of X is,
to initiate that feeling more.
Yeah. And, you can see it, where am I? If this is what I've been doing my whole life, and this is where I want to get, it almost feels like I need to tilt the scales extra the other direction.
To begin with, in order to force.
To begin with, to build up the muscle of doing the opposite of X in order to end up in some sort of nice middle path, balanced situation.
Yeah, and it's an approach that some people take.
Right. I mean, that's not necessarily universal advice, but in a pinch, like if I have to make a quick decision, I will at least consider doing the opposite of X. Just to see what happens.
Yeah.
Knowing that is a deeply uncomfortable place to go.
Yeah, that's like leaning into it, but leaning in and then leaning into that experience.
Yeah.
In my case, what I was talking about is a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no action to take other than leaning into the experience.
Right. I mean, if
there's an action,
we need to make a decision.
Yeah, if you need to make a decision about something that is a real world experience,
let's pick A or opposite of A. Let's pick the opposite of A.
Yeah. But there are some instances, like in my case, the trigger is not something that I need to do. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
It's just a feeling.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily correlate. It's just basically feeling it or not feeling it. Yeah. I don't know if we have went all the right places on this one.
We went where we needed to go.
No, yeah. It feels, it's a snapshot of where I am right now.
Yeah.
Which, like in the long run, the story is not any different. Like it's the same progression, right? But these like new nuances come in, and then you're starting to see more through these little aspects of the rawness, right? And like all the places your rawness can be, and all the places how rawness can feel like. And I think that's what it is maybe there needs to be more discussions of what the space of rawness is and how it feels like, and how to navigate through it, and how to lean into it, like actually allow this to be its own space.
Yeah. I think so.
I don't think you and I obviously talk about rawness all the time.
Yeah, but
I don't think there's enough discussions about this.
No, that's not a thing in the world, unfortunately.
Well,
now it is.
We specialize in
trendsetters,
unfiltered rawness.
Unfiltered. But look, it's over. Right? People will look back and go, "This is when the world started changing." And only then will I feel loved and complete.
Well, no, that is where my world started changing. Right?
No, the joke was only then will I get the acknowledgement that it was me and you.
I saw the joke. Yeah, okay. But there's truth there. That is the rawness and the unfilteredness is where we started to change. The whole point of this is us going through this. Like we don't have the answers, right? There's not knowing of self, and this is where I am going to end up. But the goal is to allow yourself to be in this rawness, in this uncomfortable space of in between, and be okay with it. Like, which is difficult. Like I say, that is difficult for me. I'm sure
it's difficult. It's difficult for everybody. I assume it's difficult for me. It's not a place that we're ever taught exists, let alone that we should go.
Yeah.
And if we do see it, it's super scary, and we don't want to be there. We want to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.